Are we in? Ryan, you're on mute. Yep.
All right.
Sure.
Elbow. We did it. Hey, thanks everybody for being a little bit patient here. Welcome to Cold Calling Live with Cognism. We've got a special guest this week, Greg Woodward, who is going to be my coach today. So we're going to start today's session just by doing a little bit of a background on who is Greg, why is he qualified to be giving some coaching advice here. A little bit about what he does. His approach to outbound is really spectacular. Him and I actually share a lot of common beliefs, I believe. We have a common, fanboy around the late, great Chet Holmes and the math behind outbound. And Greg's got an amazing practice that works with some of the fastest growing tech companies. And in any case, want to introduce him quickly. We're going to do a little bit about his background, his approach to outbound. And then we've got about 6 real live calls that we went through. We're going to listen and get coached up live here so you can see what it's like to work with a real pro. And of course, we want to keep this interactive along the way. So feel free to ask questions and chat along the way. And we have a jam-packed, another 54 minutes left here. So Greg, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking some time to do this with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's I think this is going to be a fun one. Just background real quick. Greg Woodward. Woodward Strategies is my firm based in Washington, D.C. I work with venture-backed tech companies that have outbound teams or even just regular salespeople that are doing outbound as part of their day-to-day. 13 countries, coaching teams that speak different languages and things like that. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun here. I always love doing a session with Ryan because he sort of thinks about it the same way as I do, in the sense of just dial, right? And just rip that Band-Aid off and get in there and start making calls and then kind of learn as you go. So I think this is going to be fun. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So what I think is really exciting about you being here is, this group, the folks that are tuning in, and feel free to chat up where you guys are all coming in from. But as Greg mentioned, he's doing this across, you said 13 different languages?
13 countries. So
13 countries. How many different languages?
Oh, I don't know. A lot. They have to speak English to work with me because I only speak one. But my point, and it's probably worth mentioning this, what we're going to be going through, which you'll see from some of the sort of coaching that I'm going to do, the approach to outbound is really based on psychology. And I know that's sort of an overused term, but it's critical here because when you're caught off guard with a cold call, for instance, your brain, the way it receives information is not the same as it is in a normal discussion. All right. So that's the psychology piece. The reason I mentioned different languages is because the psychology is universal, right? Our brains they require the same sort of process when you're caught off guard. Doesn't matter what language you're speaking. They form the same lingering questions in the same sequence, typically. So this is something that's just universally applicable. Everything we're going to be talking about today.
I love it. So we're seeing some folks coming in from London, Ireland, Costa Rica, Madrid, U.S., North Carolina, Canada, Israel. Wow, we've got some representation here today. So that's going to be awesome. And I love the fact that you have the objective data on what you just said. It's not something that is from your gut subjectively saying, well, it's different here versus there. Because that comes up often, right? Hey, it's different to do outbound in the UK versus North America versus somewhere else. And unfortunately, I don't have that experience, So having your experience in this discussion today is going to be, I think, really exciting for me to learn from, but also for those tuning in. You can see we have South Africa. We got them coming in from everywhere. So the psychology of some of this. And I think one of the things that resonates really well with me is when we talk, you talk a lot about how do you prepare for outbound. It seems to be one of the biggest challenges for folks is just getting started. You mentioned I love to just rip it off. Let's go rip dials, rip the Band-Aids. But what are some of the things that you see with the teams you're working with, the reps you're working with, as to this call reluctance, and then maybe some tips and ideas around getting over that? And then we can jump in and do some live coaching today. But I'd love to get your perspective, because I think with your perspective, people can really benefit from maybe right after this getting in and making some calls today.
The way I think about it, this is going to sound weird to folks that don't know me yet, but here's the way I think about it. When I was a little kid, I was a Cub Scout, which is, before you're actually able to be a Boy Scout. I was probably 10. And we went to summer camp for 2 weeks. And it was, even though it was August, it was really cold in the mornings. So we were in our tents and we had to get up every morning and do what they call the polar bear swim, which is just jumping in the pool. And it's kind of cold out in the morning. And to me, as a little kid, that pool looked like an Arctic glacier, and I wanted to stay in my warm sleeping bag. So I noticed, and I didn't notice it really at the time in this way, but I do now. It's kind of a metaphor for this. Most people, including me, would kind of get up to the pool, sort of still have a blanket on and kind of dip our toe in and just painfully, 1 inch at a time get in the water. And then there was other people that would just jump out of their sleeping bag, run to the pool and just jump in and tear that Band-Aid off. A second later, they're acclimated to the temperature and it feels fine. It's over with. It's done. What's next?
Yeah.
That's how I think about outbound. I mean, I'm not suggesting that anybody just pick up the phone and recklessly dial without, knowing who they're calling, without understanding what they're going to say, without having a mental picture of how this call should be designed, how this call is going to end. That's critical. Like having a mental picture of how you want this call to end. And the same applies if you're going to a meeting with someone. Like visualize how you want it to end. And that will help guide you to think on your feet. Because when you rip Band-Aid off, what happens is fight or flight takes over to a degree. And that is a tremendous asset for you on a cold call, because the truth is, if it's in your head somewhere, like if you understand enough and it's in your head somewhere, when you're in fight or flight, you don't have to consciously access it.
Yeah.
You subconsciously access it. So it just kind of happens. So you have to kind of trust yourself a little bit in that regard. Do the necessary preparations to understand your product, your solution, your personas, their pain points, and then just focus only on that goal and then dial. When you rip the Band-Aid off, when you jump in the cold pool, right? The second call is a lot easier. You're not procrastinating with these little micro actions, adjusting your chair. The third call is even easier. And then by the time you do this, 4 or 5 calls in, talk to 2 people, it's so easy. You're thinking to yourself, why don't I just do this all the time, all day? It's just so easy, right? The ROI on cold calling is so much higher than it is on anything else because there's no noise in that channel, right? People talk a big game about cold calling, but the reality of it is most reps at companies aren't doing it. The ones that are, maybe they're doing like a spotty effort with it. And then you have teams that they're call first. They're like you, Ryan. And they're the ones that are crushing it right now. Like when I say crushing it, I'm talking about crushing it right now. That's the reality of it. And that's what I see all over the place.
Can you put a definition on when you say crushing? Because do you have any insight around like what's the productivity of a team that is phone first and making the calls daily and getting it done versus maybe teams that are dabbling in it? Do you have any like real data, like reps who are phone first produce X more pipeline per rep? I know it's a little bit dependent upon industry and ACV and things like that, but like as a percentage wise, do you have any data there? Because I know you track this stuff like a hawk.
The answer is yes, I have the data, but I haven't really crunched it that way, just because in certain industries, the targets are different.
Right.
And also, and a really big variable there is if you have, let's just use an SDR team or BDR team, whatever you want to call it, as an example here. If you have like a 60, 70% inbound lead flow, and then the rest of it's outbound, right? The targets are way higher because you're dealing with inbound leads. If you're talking about a dedicated SDR team that's only doing outbound, right? The targets are going to be lower. So I'd be interested in playing around with that data, Ryan. I don't have any specific data point that I can tell you right now, but from just my own observation, if you have a team that most reps are hiding behind email, right? Let's just only talk about outbound here. Let's talk about inbound too. Mix it together, right? If you're following up with an inbound lead, that's outbound. If
Sure.
It's a stale inbound lead that, downloaded a white paper a month ago and you're calling them, that's an outbound call. That's a cold call. So I kind of consider it the same thing there. It really is an inbound lead when they set up online, they'll set up a meeting with you and that meeting's scheduled. Okay. That's an inbound lead. It's a little different. But in terms of just following up, doing cold calls, inbound and outbound, if the cold call is part of the daily workflow, like consistently, the ROI on that versus if they were only doing email, it could easily be 10x, easily. Yeah. I can tell you that, easily 10x. And now you got me interested. Now
Well,
you've
that
got me
makes
interested in playing with my data to really find out the actual answer to that, but easily 10x. No
that makes a
question.
lot of sense to me because when I was tracking this stuff pretty heavily at the sales developers, outsourced sales development as a service company. And
Yeah.
at first we were doing emailing and phone as a part of our program. We launched with Connect and Sell and Outreach. And um, when I looked back on the first year, and there was a few thousand meetings that had been scheduled, I looked at this. What initiated the meeting? Was it the call first, or was it the email? Right. So what was initiating the conversation?
Hmm.
95% of all the meetings scheduled started with the phone first. Only 5% were like a true cold email response that then moved into a meeting. And so from that point on, I had looked at, okay, so if 95% of the production was happening via the phone first,
Hmm.
um, half of our time was spent setting up email sequences, warming up domains, getting approval from clients to run the messaging. It was a lot of work for only
Yeah.
5% of the production. So we ripped out cold email altogether, and I haven't looked back
Yeah.
since then. Since because I exited the sales developers right before the pandemic, I've been tracking cold email. HubSpot produces this data, and they have a tracker. Sales
Hmm.
emails are up over like 100 and something percent, the actual send volume, and the
Yeah.
responses are down like 38%. So
Yeah.
if the production was 95.5 before the pandemic, and HubSpot is reporting on over 100,000 customers, by the way, this is across many verticals, industries, etc. If that's the truth,
Hmm.
then I wouldn't be surprised that you get about 10x lift on productivity with that phone first mindset. And I love
Yeah.
the idea that you're thinking. I like to call it proactive calling, not necessarily cold calling,
Hmm.
because the reality is, if you don't expect my call, that's a cold call. That's how I define it. Or you could call it an unscheduled proactive call.
Yeah.
You know, but for
Mhm.
today, when we get into the calling, these are going to be 100% cold calls. These were lists that I had generated and completely cold called. So you're going to get a feel for what it's like going after them. And before we get into the live calls, Greg, I did want to talk a little bit about the mindset piece. So there's one thing saying, okay, let's rip off the band-aid, but do you have any tips, tricks, best practices for folks that are tuning in around, um, how they can prepare themselves or how they can develop that mental muscle of just ripping off the band-aid? I know you share that idea around, tinkering, and then you get into the flow state, but
Yeah.
is there any tips you have for folks that want to maybe be a little bit more productive on the phone?
Yeah. So people tend not to do things because they can't visualize themselves doing it, and we're all that way. It's it's um, it's the reason why if you have an objective with a quota, for instance, and you're a salesperson and you haven't achieved that yet, um, when you're working up to it for the first time, there's a little bit of question in your mind: Am I going to be able to achieve this? I've never broken this record. But then when you achieve it, it becomes table stakes for you, and that becomes just sort of automatic in most cases, at least the way you think about it, right? The difference between before you achieved it and after you achieved it, it really all it is that you can now visualize yourself doing it. That's really important to understand. Okay. So people tend not to do what they can't visualize themselves doing. Now, this is important for people making cold calls, but it's also important for the prospect. And we're going to get into that in a little while here. But just focusing on people making cold calls, how do you use that reality to your advantage? If you're a newer rep and you're uncomfortable making cold calls, everybody's uncomfortable, but it's really a case of how uncomfortable are you, right? Then it's probably because you can't really visualize yourself doing it, and you're asking yourself the wrong kinds of questions. You're over analyzing, you're creating movies in your head. What happens if they ask me this and I don't know the answer? And then you're coming up with a reason to procrastinate. Let me go research this first. That's not what you want to do. So the core anxiety is, if you really distill it down, and I ask reps that go through my training programs, give me an anonymous feedback to this question. One of the times I ask them, what is it you're really afraid of? And they say, well, what happens if I just don't know the answer to something? Well, the reality of it is if you don't know the answer to something, you can turn that into an amazing opportunity for yourself. Don't try and make up an answer. If you don't know the answer to something, there's two things you can do. Number one, you can tell them you don't know the answer to whatever they just asked you, and you don't want to give them incorrect information. So what you're going to do is you're going to talk internally, and what you'll do is you get back to them today with more information to see if it makes sense to continue the conversation. So that's a graceful way to bail, because what you're doing to make that an opportunity is you're inserting what I call a mini contract, which is simple. You're saying you're going to do something, and then you do it. Now, Ryan, if I did that with you, it wouldn't really resonate because you know me. There's other content to go on. You subconsciously already have a perception of me, and that forms how you feel. That's already been done. But if you don't know me, everything that I'm doing is happening under a microscope. Our subconscious does this with everything. Our brain does this with everything. And this is what dictates how we feel about things and how we feel about people. Okay? An example. If, Ryan, I come to your house and I walk in and I maybe make a joke that kind of offends you a little bit, right? You notice it for a minute, but it doesn't really change the fact that we're friends. If I bring somebody you don't know to your house and they make the same joke and it kind of offends you a little bit, how do you feel about that person? You don't like them.
Yeah, you're not going to like them. Yeah.
No. So that's why this is important. So if you don't know what to say, use that. Now, the second thing is, the anxiety around, what happens if I get, deer in headlights on this call? Okay. That never really happens. But if it does happen, all you have to do to get rid of that anxiety is just prepare, a 2-sentence statement to bail, which is very similar to the first example, right? Let me get back to you. I want to make sure that I'm not taking your time for no reason. I'm going to talk to some folks internally. Let me send you some more context later today, and we'll see if it makes sense to continue the conversation. And just bail gracefully, right? If you know you have that, it's just psychological. If you know you have that, that anxiety is gone. So now what you're dealing with is a smaller sort of pile of issues to kind of get over before you rip that Band-Aid off. The other thing I'll say, Ryan, is sometimes here's something interesting. When a rep gets hired in a company, even if they're like a more seasoned salesperson, and you can do this too, check it out. It's interesting. Ask that person to describe to you in a couple of sentences what the company does. What's the value proposition? Yeah. Right. And it's digestible in most cases, almost all cases, because it mirrors their simplistic view and their knowledge set on how to answer that question. Right. Go ask the founder of the company the same question, and you won't even understand the answer. You won't even understand the answer. So I play with this. Like, this is what happens. If you don't know a lot about something and you're doing outbound, that's an advantage. So, what I do is I actually purposefully gate my knowledge about things so I don't over-explain.
Yes.
So you just need to know enough about the persona, their pain points, very simplistic way of explaining what the company does and what the value is. And that is it, because you're not calling to explain more than that. You're calling to give them enough of a reason to have a longer conversation with someone else, in most cases with outbound.
I love that. And that actually answers one of these questions that just came in here. Where did it go? What should the goal of the cold call? Quick discovery call, set up discovery call, anything else? And I think you just hit that. So when you're cold calling, our job isn't to go into full on discovery and be prepared for every little, get some intrigue, get a little bit of information to make sure it's worth the next conversation, and get that contract to take another time at a scheduled date to have that discussion. If you're trying to do a lot more on a true cold call, you're not going to get much further than that, right? It's unscheduled, proactive conversation. Now, from time to time, you might get somebody who wants to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
But that's how I feel about cold calls. How do you feel about the warmer stuff, like the inbound, maybe requests that went dormant, et cetera? Is there a different intent from your perspective?
Yeah. So the inbounds are going to be they're not going to be as, quote, caught off guard in the same way. They weren't expecting your follow-up call, but they at least have a mental picture of what this is about. So in the beginning of an inbound call, the thing you need to do immediately, beginning of really any cold call, is you need to connect the dot between where they are right now and how you're familiar to them. So, it's not fancy to do this. It's not hard. You just basically say, look, the first thing out of your mouth, first and last name, using a tonality that conveys they don't know who you are, so you don't create a lingering question. Your company name, and then a few words as to how it's relevant to them. You inquired with us about a month ago on XYZ. Quiet. You'll hear them with you. They'll make a noise. The reason for my call, boom, you're in. That's an inbound call, right?
Yep.
Somebody in the chat mentioned something. I mean, we kind of just talked about this, but it's really worth underlining it. Before you make a cold call, even if it's the same kind of call you're always making, right? Have a notebook in front of you and always just write down the goal. It works. It helps keep you calibrated mentally. When the conversation goes in different directions, it helps keep you focused. It's really, really important to do that every single time. Get into a habit doing that. I do it every time I get on the phone, right? And the reality of it is if you don't do that, you're in the moment. The conversation can go in any direction, and then you realize at the end of the call, after it's over, that you kind of lost sight of what the objective was. You didn't really check that box. That was the full reason you were calling.
Yep. I see that so often with reps just getting started, is especially once they've had an opportunity to really get through an entire call. Questions are going back and forth. They get super excited, and then there's no ask.
Yeah.
It just kind of ends. It's just like, all right,
see you later.
See you later.
No, be of the mind that you're approaching somebody in a thoughtful way because you know something about them. If you don't know something about them, meaning if you don't even know what their company does, then don't call them, right? Because you won't be in the right mindset. You'll be in the mindset that, you're doing this sort of awkward job and you're probably annoying some people. Maybe just law of averages. Some people will say, okay, they'll stay on the phone with you. You don't even want to go there. You've got to be of the mind that the only reason you're calling these people is because you selected them. And you're not just calling down a list, you're approaching them because of something specific and relevant to them, something about them that you're aware of that's also relevant to you. And it just changes the way that you articulate what you're saying. And most of what is happening on a cold call that matters is how you're saying it, not the words that you're using, right? And if you're in that mindset, and you're in the mindset, if you're doing B2B, that, this is the business day and you're calling somebody at their business about business, and this is what business people do. Just control your internal vernacular about what it is you're doing. It'll change everything. And lastly, I'll say this sounds a little unconventional, but my filter for things is, does it work? If the answer is yes, then I say it. So here it is. The alter ego approach is really critical to understand, especially if you're a newer rep. Goes back to people tend not to do things because they can't visualize themselves doing it. And athletes use this a lot. People use this a lot, but it really, really works for cold calling, right? So if you're maybe not so experienced making cold calls, whatever, and you're kind of nervous about it, can you visualize me doing it? Can you visualize Ryan doing it? We do this with stuff around us anyway without even consciously realizing it. But if you can visualize somebody else doing it and you like the way they do it, it sounds elegant, the way they say this, then just visualize yourself as that person and make the call. I know that sounds weird, but it is insane what it does. I listen to recordings. I tell reps to do this, and I listen to before and after, and you can literally hear it. And they pick up mannerisms from other people that they're visualizing themselves doing it as. And it just removes resistance. You don't have to do that forever, but if you need to break the ice, that's a great way to do it. It works. So try that.
On that note, I think that's a great transition into
let's
do it, right? So the last half of this session here, we're going to go through some real live calls that I did just last Friday. So this was less than a couple days ago. It was literally the last day of the quarter. So you'll hear some of these are a little bit busy. We're targeting sales leaders and some CEOs for Cognism. The data has been scrubbed out. The reason why we didn't do it live is we want to make sure we're sharing the other sides of the calls here. So you're going to hear both sides of the conversations. We're going to play the calls through, and we're going to get some live calling. There's no scrubbing any of the bad out, the good, bad. These are literally call for call. So I called for a little bit less than an hour, and there's going to be like 6 calls that are the connects that had happened. So we're going to go through those, and we're going to get some live coaching. I have my pen and pad here for feedback, and we're going to play the call. Greg's going to give some feedback. We're going to play the call, get the feedback. So we got another 30 minutes or so on the show. We'll probably leave 5 to 10 minutes at the end for Q&A, assuming the coaching doesn't take too long. But we'll get right into it, Greg. Let's make sure this works here. So this is going to be...
To the next. Hello. That's me. How can I help you?
Hey, this is Ryan Reiser with Cognism.
Okay.
You weren't actually expecting my call. It's the first time I've reached you. Do you mind if I take a a half a minute to share exactly why I was calling?
No, brother. Can you call me back on Monday or Tuesday? It's just too much in my head right now, and I'm dealing with too many things. So call me back on Monday or Tuesday, okay?
Yeah, that's not a problem. I know I'm catching at the end of the month here. Is there a specific time that might work best, Monday or Tuesday?
No, I don't care about end of the month. I care about projects that I'm doing in my house today, and I'm not working in the office. So
Okay.
call me on Monday, okay?
Yeah. Can I just confirm? I want to make sure I have the right information for you still. Are you still the sales director over there at
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll
Thanks.
make a note to call back. Have a great day.
All right, bye.
Bye. I was
Okay.
going to say, did we get blacked out again?
Yeah.
All right. So the first one's there.
Okay. Look, and this is kind of consistent with I think all your calls that I've listened to at least. One of the things I really like about what you're doing, and it's really worth everybody noting this, to some people listening to this, because I know you're doing it deliberately, it might sound like you're tripping over yourself a little bit in the beginning of the call.
Mm-hmm.
You need to do that, and what you're really doing there is you're starting out real slow. So there's no chance of the prospect saying, what was your name again? Because as soon as they do that, they're the ones commanding the responses, and you kind of lost control over the call. So you say your name, using a tonality that conveys they don't know who you are, right? And a speed that is, when they pick up the phone and their brains spin around on overdrive trying to figure out what this is, a speed that they can digest without forming a lingering question that's going to trip them up and confuse them. Who was it calling me again? So you say, hi, my name is Ryan Reiser. Like, I don't need you to repeat that because you said it slow enough. I caught it. It's like if you walk up to somebody and just throw a baseball at them and they're not expecting it's going to hit them in the face. Right? You got to let them know you're getting ready to throw the ball. And I like how you did that. The other thing I'll say here is, in this case, the prospect was just, the prospect was doing other things. When you've talked to the prospect and they need to get off the phone, your gut will tell you in the moment if it's, I need to get off the phone because I'm in the middle of something else, I'm not able to engage, but I'm open to it some other time, let them go immediately. The speed in which you let them go, right? The speed in which you let them go will serve you because you're going to call them back. And when you call them back, the reason you're calling becomes because you said you would. Because I told you I would. And that's a completely different way to start a call. So in a situation like this, where they look, I got to go. I can't do anything right now. Just call me on Monday. No problem. I understand. Don't worry about it. I'll call you on Monday. Boom. Make a note of that. Call them on Monday and say, look, I caught you on Friday. I think you were probably moving. I promised I'd call you back today. Is this a better time? People will always remember how you made them feel, especially at this stage. And they really don't remember much about what you say. It's the way we are. If you let them off quickly, yield back their time immediately. It's a form of courtesy. And they never get to that point where they feel, like, I need to get off the phone. I already told you that. That's going to serve you. The opposite is if you ask, start asking questions when they tell you they need to go, they hang up. Now it's really hard to call them back because it's kind of awkward, right? If they'll even pick up at all. So that's something I would have done differently there. It wasn't an issue here. You asked a couple of questions. I'm assuming the data you're using will, if you go to LinkedIn, you can see if the person's still at that company in that role. That might be something to do, so you don't have to ask that question. I understand why you would want to ask that question. So that's kind of the feedback on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that I love the feedback there and the change I'll make too. So from a follow-up perspective, I always note, obviously date and time when I made a call.
Mm-hmm.
And in situations like that, I have specific language words that they use, right? So I now know that it wasn't the end of the month, but I could use the, hey, I called you. I thought it was the end of the month, but you were actually doing some stuff with your home.
Yeah.
And you asked for a call back. What that does when I get into the conversation is it makes it so much easier to get to what I call a completion, right? You don't get another brush off if it was a true brush off. They're okay. Yeah. What's this about? So that's how but I love what you're saying is like, I'm calling you back because I said I would.
Mm-hmm.
Adding that addition, I think makes it even more powerful because again, you're doing the things you said you were, and you're having that consistency as you stated in the pre-show.
Yeah.
So I love that feedback. And in terms of how I believe in this, so again, from my perspective, I always call people who I know pick up the phone because I've run them through my process, answer some of these questions that are coming in. It's a combination. Some of these are mobile, some of them are direct. You'll actually see one goes through a gatekeeper, I think, today. So it's a
Yep.
combination of all of them, but they have been pre-validated as phone picker uppers. So I know that these are people who pick up the phone because they picked up the phone before. And what that means is I don't have to be so pressure to like try
Yeah.
to get better information. And the reason why I always like to confirm title like company is sometimes in this modern world today, even at LinkedIn, you're finding people have just moved. So if
Yeah.
I can just get that little piece of information again, like, okay, you started there. Okay, perfect. It's relevant. I'm going to give you a call back. I know and I can reference that again in my follow up. And you mentioned you're still the director of sales over here. So I can actually set context quickly in the follow up. And that's why
Yeah.
I asked that question.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question to ask if you have the concern of maybe they aren't in that role anymore, even though it says they are on LinkedIn, which happens. But you have to go with your gut, in my opinion, as to, should I try to push that question out? They're trying to get off the phone.
Yep.
Your gut's going to be right about it, if it's okay or not, usually.
Yep. No, I love that. And the lack or the situational awareness of like not going too far, is perfect. Let's move to the second one here. And this is actually, like I said, this one's going to be going past the gatekeeper, it looks like.
Okay.
So
Good afternoon. Thanks. How may I help you?
please.
Okay, one moment, please.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for holding. This is how can I help you?
Hey, this is Ryan Reiser with Cognism.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you asking here. You actually weren't expecting my call. This is the first time I reached you. Do you mind if I take a half a minute to share exactly why I called?
Sure. How can I help?
Oh, perfect. Well, really, the purpose of my call today was just to see if we could find some time on your calendar to introduce my company. That way I'm not calling you out of the blue here. I was wondering if you might have some time, maybe next Tuesday or Wednesday after we wrap up the end of month here.
Yeah, sure. What were you at? But my caller ID, you're not calling out of Florida, are you?
The caller ID that I have might be coming out of Florida. We use a dialing system so we own a batch of numbers. So by state, there's some numbers, but we're a global company. I personally am based in California.
Okay. Yeah, we have 3 different sales departments here. I just don't want to step on any toes. Make sure you're talking to the right people.
Yeah. Well, have you heard of my company, Cognism? Are you familiar with us at all?
No, I don't think you guys have bought from us before. I don't see you here in our in our customer list.
Yeah. This is right.
Yeah, this is he.
Okay. And there's not a couple. So you're still the VP of operations over there?
Yeah, more or less. I just handled the Northeast sales territory.
Okay. Yeah, so the reason I was reaching out is not as a customer here. I was reaching out to introduce our company. What we do is we have a platform that helps organizations. So you're in a sales position now, so we can help you tell which companies are actively looking into services like yours or maybe even your competitors. And then we supplement that with mobile numbers, verified emails, things like that, so that your team can get out and have more sales conversations and spend less time manually prospecting. Just out of curiosity, what kind of tools are you guys using today to bring in new business?
We pretty much just rely on Google advertising, I believe.
Oh, okay. Google Ads?
Yeah, they just run Google Ads for fiber, and then we get the leads inbound.
Okay. Well, this potentially could be a fit for whoever's running those ads, but also from an individual contributor position. Do you ever find yourself in a position where you may have had a good conversation, but you need to maybe look up somebody else within an organization and do any outbound directly? Or is that something that's not really a part of the go-to-market for the organization today?
No, that doesn't sound familiar with what I do.
Okay. Yeah, this might not be a direct fit for you, Parker, but if you guys are running Google Ads, there may be a fit for a conversation with whoever's running the marketing side of things.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah.
There's two of them. What's
Yeah, the father and son, they kind of tag team it.
Gotcha. Father and son. What's their last names?
Oh,
Okay. And they're the ones that run marketing?
yeah, they handle the Google ads and new inbound business and all that.
Okay. Do you happen to have a good extension for either of those? I can reach out to them directly if that's a better
Yeah, I can transfer you. They're not in the office today, but I could transfer this extension if you'd like.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
All right, just a moment.
Thanks for your help.
You have reached the mailbox for extension 105.
Hey, this is Ryan Reiser calling with Cognism. Just had a conversation with over on the sales side, and he actually mentioned I might have a better success talking with you, or perhaps as I understand you're responsible for the marketing initiatives, running Google Ads, etc. Wanted to see if we might be able to find some time next week when you're back in the office for a brief introductory conversation. If you're around and available, my number here directly is, again, this is Ryan with Cognism, was referred your way by, and my number directly is, thank you. Marathon. All right.
There it is. I was just taking some notes. Okay, let me pull this one apart. You know, you do this all the time. So your tonality, we don't have to get into that. Your tonality is very natural. You know, I know how many times you make the same call over and over again. It never really sounds like that. So all the stuff I said before about the intro and the way you say your name, the speed, box checked, right? There's a couple of things here that I want to just kind of talk about. Nobody has a time machine. If you could go back and, you know, make little tweaks to certain things, you know, I would do that to my own calls every single time. So this is just the way I like to think about it. One of the things that I don't personally do, but I kind of like it. I think you probably got it from someone else. Maybe you've been doing it for a while, is, you know, just telling them in the beginning that you don't know who I am, or we've never spoken. You know, I guess I guess it accomplishes relevant clarity to a degree, which is what I focus on in the beginning of the call. So in the beginning of the call, they need to immediately form a mental picture that's familiar to them, that's also relevant in some way to you. Until that happens, they won't be present with you. You'll continue talking, but they're going to be hung up on a lingering question because their brain needs that. It needs that before they can be present with you and basically absorb what you're saying with the context that you want them to. And what you'll hear if you don't achieve relevant clarity in the very beginning of the call is you'll get through the call, you're listening to the recording, and then halfway through the call, the prospect goes, what does your company do? And it's like getting kicked in the face. I mean, like, now you have to go all the way back to the beginning again, right? And the reason why it wasn't because the way you were talking wasn't, you know, the right tonality and the right cadence. It was just because they weren't listening. It's like if you can think of a time you're reading a book and your mind goes off on some random thing, and then you come to that point where you're like, you know, I don't really know what it was I just read for the last 3 pages. I was thinking about something else. That happens in a second, like a fraction of a second on a cold call. So we need to create relevant clarity in the beginning. Okay, I'll give you some ideas on how to do that. The other thing is, well, I'll give you some ideas how to do that right now because it'll make the other point make sense. Ryan Reiser, calling with Cognism. Okay, Cognism doesn't mean anything to anyone that doesn't know what Cognism is. So just, if it's a cold call, just assume they don't know what it is. And you know, most tech companies have funny names. And if it's a really funny name, they get hung up on, how do I pronounce that? That's not my point. Cognism, now I want to say something that will promote a mental picture that they're familiar with. And this cannot include business speak. This cannot sound like marketing. This has to be like a 3-year-old would say it. So I'd say, hi, my name's Ryan Reiser. I'm calling with Cognism. We provide companies with contact data for outbound prospecting. We haven't spoken before, and then move into the call. I don't have to burn any mental calories to form a mental picture of a company that provides contact data for outbound prospecting, especially if outbound prospecting is relevant to me, if I run a team, for instance. So that's relevant clarity. And, you know, if you achieve that in the very beginning of the call, they're with you, right? And that's important. The other thing is, what I would do, what I would try and tweak here is you use what I call a label, which is excellent, but I think you're using it a little too soon on this call. Label is, you know, the reason for my call. That needs to come. It needs to come after the relevant clarity, because if you're asking them a question on a cold call, even though it's a low friction ask, it's not some real commitment. You're not asking them to buy anything, but if you're asking them a question that you want the answer to be yes to, you're still dealing with an emotional decision process on a cold call. The yes question is always going to create resistance. It doesn't matter what the question is. Do you like red? It'll create resistance, right? So before that yes question, I need to make sure that you have relevant clarity, you're with me. And I need to make sure that I've given you proper context to defuse that yes question, right? So if I called you and said, hey, Greg Woodward Strategies, you're like, I don't really know what Woodward Strategies is. And I'm like, the reason I'm calling, I wanted to see if we can set up a meeting next week. I haven't given you a reason yet to do it. So what's the answer going to be? It's going to be no, right? So that's really key. And so we can't read a book to them before we ask them that question. So this is where the planning comes in. We need to really think about how we want to design this call and then just be natural about it, right? Give them a reason, just enough, not too much, just enough to have that call with you. And the best and the fastest way to do that is to use an observation about them. Look, I see that you just ramped up headcount after Series B. The reason I'm calling, I was wondering if we could have set up some time next week to have a conversation about Cognism. We work with companies in your space. And again, we provide the lead data, verified lead data for their sales team. So I just want to show you a few things to see if it makes sense to have a longer conversation. I've given you a reason. It's about you. I've conveyed that I know something about you with an observation. So the way you do that at scale is you look at your list and you say, okay, well, this is my ICP list. Maybe there's 3 groups of personas. You know, one group might have a few titles in it, like VP and CRO, I consider one persona. And I put them in and you call it buckets. I put them in buckets, and then I spend the time at the list level personalizing, thinking about what observation for this bucket of 5,000 people can I use? It doesn't sound like I'm trying to use an observation to paint a broad brush with. Similar companies, you know, don't do that, right? We work with B2B tech companies specifically in the cybersecurity space. That's a bucket, right? Even though you work with others too, but you also work with cybersecurity. Yep. Hiring reps is a bucket. Just raised Series B is a bucket. Has SDRs as a bucket. If you call them BDRs, so do I. That kind of a thing. And it allows you to use that observation. The observation is the most powerful thing you can use on a cold call because it brings the prospect into the conversation by automatically giving them a reason to be in it, right? It puts them in the picture. And when they're in the picture, they listen to it differently and they have context that is going to serve you. Context that you want them to have, you know, the lens that you want them to look through when you're talking.
Love it. So
Yep.
you'll see in these calls, I'm running a specific framework that shifts the context later in the call, and that's by design as well. So so you'll see that the pattern's going to continue here. Unfortunately, this isn't live. We go and take action on it because I would love to go in and like be able to take the coaching and get to the next connect. We won't be able to do that today, but your framework makes total sense around that mental clarity before getting into the next phase, and that's the conversation design that you talked about at the beginning of the call. So really good stuff. There's a question that popped in here before we go to the next recording, and I want to keep going so we can get into as many of these lives as possible. But someone asked about getting past the gatekeeper. A lot of times people overcomplicate that. That particular there it is right there. That particular account. There's 2 different types of people who answer phones. There's what I would call a gatekeeper, and then there's operators. That's not technically a gatekeeper. It was an operator. All I have to do is call and say, Greg Woodward, please shut up. Call was transferred. A lot of times what people do is they call and then they start pitching to the person who answered the phone. Very bad idea. And so you feel like there's a lot more gatekeepers than there really are. So that's how I got through you here. All I did was say, hey, Greg Woodward, please. Greg Woodward, please. Or I might say, is Greg running around there today? And just shut up. So that's how you get past that. If you get into the 411 with a gatekeeper, then this is someone who's truly asking you questions. And by the way, this is like maybe 1% of all data where there's someone like this. And I can show you guys this. I have like legitimate outcomes called blocked by gatekeeper. Those types of conversations are a little bit different, but you're going to start the same way. If they start asking, what's this about, so on and so forth, you're going to answer, you're with this company, so on. And then basically you're just keep saying, hey, sounds like Greg might be busy. Is there any opportunity you could transfer me through to the voicemail? And by asking for that, a lot of times you just get transferred. And more often than not these days, the person will pick up on the other side.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
don't pitch to the gatekeeper. You're just looking to go through. Gatekeeper could just be an operator, and you're going to get through more often than not. If you get to a true gatekeeper, someone who owns that person's schedule, it's not very common. And I would still run the tactic of trying to get through. And if that's a high value target and they're not letting you transfer, there's two options. One, you likely shouldn't call through it. Or two, if you get value from learning from them, because they truly do have the calendar, it's a very rare oddity, but they are the person that controls the calendar. Then you can take that step back and say something like, hey, maybe you can help me. And then you get into the discussion. But it's a very different conversation. 99% of the time, you don't really have a gatekeeper. You have someone who's going to transfer the call for you. So focus on getting the transfer. Don't focus on pitching.
Right on. And I think it beeped, so I didn't. I know how you make these calls. It's when you deal with an operator, it's the same exact way I do it. You don't say your name in most cases. Just say, "Can you connect me with Ryan Reisert's office, please?"
Yep.
Because their job is just to put the call through. That's all they really want to do. They're not there to screen you, and they won't unless you really give them a reason to. Like if you called and say, "Hi, this is Ryan Reisert with Cognism. I'm wondering if you can connect me with."
Yes, that's exactly
Don't do
right.
that.
Don't do that.
You're done.
Just
No.
hey, Greg Wood, please.
Yeah.
They're probably going to patch you through. So
Yeah.
let's move on in interest of time. I wanted to answer that one. We got 12 minutes left, so hopefully we can get through a couple more of these live. Really good feedback. Loving this so far, Greg.
Hello?
Hi, is this
Yes?
hey, this is Ryan Reisert calling with Cognism. You actually weren't expecting my call. This is the first time I've reached you. Do you mind if I take a half a minute to share exactly why I called?
Yes.
Okay. So the purpose of my call really was just to see if we could find some time for an introductory call to introduce our company. That way I'm not calling you out of the blue here. I was curious if you might have some time, maybe next Tuesday or Wednesday, once we get past the end of the month here.
What is it regarding?
Oh, yeah. My company is Cognism. Are you familiar with us at all? Does the name ring a bell?
No. Mm-mm.
That's not a problem. I have you as I was on your LinkedIn page here. You're still the new business sales manager over there. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Oh, okay, perfect. So what Cognism is we are a platform that can help tell you which companies are actually actively looking into services like yours or your competitors. And we can supplement that information with mobile numbers, direct dials, verified emails. So you as a new business development leader and your team can have more conversations and spend less time manually prospecting. Does that sound like something you'd be interested in learning a little bit more about in the next week or two?
What I would encourage you to do is to look within our organization and reach out to a marketing person and see if it's a program that they want to add in, is what I would encourage you to do.
Okay.
I don't actually have a contact because we're in transition right now. So that's what I would encourage you to maybe reach out to a marketing lead within the group and ask them.
Okay. Is that because marketing is directly responsible for providing the data to the new business sales team?
Well, they build things for us for our sales.
Okay.
Campaigns and things of that nature. Mm-hmm.
Just out of curiosity, are there any tools you're using today that's helping you with list
I'm not
development?
sure. You would need to ask them. Yeah, you would need to ask them.
Okay, it's just not your
the
purview at all.
programs that they're using.
Got it. Okay. So you don't have any tools that like help you off of LinkedIn or grab contact information?
Well, I have Sales Navigator and stuff like that. But
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a system that would supplement Sales Navigator really effectively. So it's while you're in Sales Navigator, there's a plugin that pops up over the top of Navigator. So if you find a contact that you're reaching out to, so say it looks like you do a lot of trade shows and things like that, networking events, things like that, while you're connecting with somebody, you could actually find their direct contact information right from their profile.
No, I understand. And like I said, what I would encourage you to do is contact someone, because anything that's implemented, or even if I use, it needs to be within the organization. Working with a larger corporation like this is how it works. Even my sales navigator is through Informa.
Oh, of course,
So
yeah,
it needs
yeah.
to be done there.
So we're reaching out. Typically, we start with folks to make sure there's interest, a business case, and things like that. So if you're interested, it wouldn't be necessarily a sales call where I expect you to show up and swipe your card. It's more about evaluating a little bit more about how you go about your new business development process, and then show you a little bit more about how it works. And if at that point it looks like it's something worth exploring at the organization, then we can take it up through the more traditional procurement process. Do you ever take time to evaluate tools and just kind of look at what's new on the market?
No, not right. No, I don't. Not
Okay.
unless they come to us with it.
Gotcha. Okay, and there's
a
nobody.
whole team that does that. That's what I'm telling you.
Gotcha. And
I don't spend time doing that.
And that's done through marketing leadership, you said? But
I
don't
would
know.
start there.
You don't know who might be the best point of contact at all by name?
I would just search like how you found me. I would search that and then start there. But start within the marketing division is what I would do.
Right.
Okay?
I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you so much. You too. That is what I would encourage you to do.
That woman really annoyed me. Wow. So there's a lot of things I love about the way you handled that. We're going to get into all that, but let me ask you, what persona was that?
She was a new business development leader. Like that was like literally her title said new business development sales, director of new business development sales.
Okay, so director persona. They're not decision makers typically.
Yeah.
This is a VP play.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's hard. It's really hard. Again, this is like the list that I'm working on is for Cognism is their super SMBs, which was interesting. She's saying bigger companies, so it should have been like super SMBs and then director and above in business development or CEOs. There's some CEOs on this list, and then there's sometimes demand gen or marketing leadership as well. So that particular one is like a director of new business development of like should be a smaller company, which is sometimes like the sales leader, right? You just don't know until you have the conversation. That's why it's true.
Yeah. I mean, so it was the wrong persona for this call in this particular case, obviously, because they weren't the ones that handled that. You were getting emotional objections. This person sounds like they were asleep, and they probably spend most of the day asleep. I hate it when I run into people like that, but I use it as batting practice, and I think that's kind of what you did. I loved how you did it. You did what I call looping, right? So you acknowledged, sure, I can do that. And then you asked a question, which in this particular case was a qualification question. I tried to write it down quickly. I don't remember the exact question. It was, are you using tools for X, right? This person you're dealing with somebody who just wants to kick the can down the road and doesn't really want to do any thinking or burn any mental calories doing anything. So you just get the sluggish sort of push off response, and they just keep repeating themselves like a robot. Oh, you go to marketing. I think you should probably recommend. I don't know anybody there though, because I don't actually go to work. But so play with those when you get them. It's just good batting practice. The call's not going to go anywhere when that happens in most cases. But let's just pretend that you were dealing with somebody that had just minor interest in doing their job. And I know I sound harsh, but I can't stand it when I get people like that, because I wonder why a company hired them. But it's the truth. I'm just very blunt about it. What you did beautifully was you continued to keep the conversation going. So when you get an emotional objection, usually there's nothing really logical behind it. So the thing to do is instead of trying to solve it by saying, no, you're wrong, I'm right, and here's why, which you didn't do, which is awesome, you just acknowledge it. And then you ask a question that requires more than a yes or no answer, which is exactly what you did multiple times. The beautiful thing, which is really what I liked about this, is that the question that you asked was a qualification question, meaning it's a question you kind of need to know the answer to before you can advance the sales process anyway. And if this person, spoke in sentences longer than 3 words, they probably would have told you things that you could use. You could take notes on it, and you could use as an additional reason why, like, look, I'm happy to go to marketing, but the reason I called you is because, and then state an observation about them, and then state something that they just said, some detail that they just mentioned to you in response to a qualification question, and just say, look, here's the observation, and if XYZ is the case, defuse them. And again, I'm happy to go to marketing, but that said, I do think it'd be worth your time if we could talk next week. What I'd like to show you is this, and here's why. Would you be open to that? And just bring them back to that call to action again, because you've gotten them far enough away from that emotional objection, which there's nothing behind it. So when they start talking, the more they start talking, the longer the conversation goes. As soon as they have an observation that's like, okay, this is relevant to me, and a reason, all you have to do is go back to the CTA again, which, you did all that stuff. You're just dealing with somebody that didn't really, they just weren't on, I guess is the way to say it.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
the targeting is a little bit off on that one as well, but yeah, I mean, that type of personality comes up. We've got a comment in here saying it's not the only person that has to deal with it. Unfortunately, we're coming up on time. I think
bummer.
Our clock says we only have 3 minutes left here. So, we're going to have to land the plane on the live show today, but,
bummer.
But we had a couple more recordings. Maybe we'll have to circle back and do it again. I know we started a little bit late, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time, especially yours today. Greg, thank you so much for coming in and being a part of the show. The feedback is really powerful. I love getting perspective from folks who are actually doing it day in and day out. And, there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat when it comes to outbound. But the thing that I took away from the session today is, like, the best thing you can do is have an idea of where you're going, right? Have that framework in place, get an idea of those common words, phrases, and sentences that will allow you to progress a conversation. Don't overthink it. Rip the Band-Aid off and go. You're going to be in a really good shape if you just get started. And from there, if you take if you take the time to actually listen into calls and get feedback like this, you can start to get better over time. But as long as you have a good mental framework in place, you kind of know the direction of the conversation. Getting started is better than not. That's the real big takeaway that I had from today's session. Is there anything else you'd want to leave with the group before we land here? We got about 2 minutes before this clock's going to run out on us.
Yeah, look, everything you just said is there's a great solid takeaways. If you're newer at this, honestly, what you're going to get the ultimate ROI from the fastest is watching other people's calls and listening to your own recordings. You're going to hear things in your own recordings that you don't hear in the moment because you're focused on, fight or flight at that time. And when you listen back to it, you can hear little things that you do that you really like, that you weren't really aware of. And now you can bottle that and use it more deliberately. And you're going to also hear things that, I don't really like the way I said that. So now you're conscious of it. And that's the best way to sharpen the saw, even if you're seasoned at doing this. I mean, you have to listen to your call recordings because things are constantly evolving. If you did anything for 1 hour to try and improve cold calling, that would be the ultimate power activity.
Yeah, I don't do enough of it myself. I love these sessions because it's, to your point, you hear these little things like, dang it, missed that one thing. Should have spoke faster here. Should have slowed down there. I'm over talking someone. It's a big problem I have. And it's like, you can see that stuff. And it's those micro improvements over time that'll help you get to the next level. I know you're a pretty busy person, but and you've got a lot going on. But if folks wanted to reach out to you, is there a way for people to get in touch with Greg?
Yeah, woodwardstrategies.com is my website. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Gregory C. Woodward. And if you want to learn more about my training programs, just go to woodwardstrategies.com/navigate. And there's programs for teams and individuals in there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for being a part of the show, and everyone tuning in live. Thank you so much for being here. We have a couple more recordings. They'll probably drop on the news feed over the next couple of days via Cognism's LinkedIn channel, maybe even my own. So follow us if you're not doing that already. I would assume most of you are, but if you haven't, make sure to follow us there. Either me through my main LinkedIn channel or Cognism, so you can get these live recordings and tune in for the next show that we'll have next month. So thanks again for tuning in, Greg.
Thanks for having me. I have a lot of fun doing these with you. Thank you.